Hello class, in this tutorial I'd like to begin adding in CSS to the head of your HTML file. So in a couple of the previous tutorials we've looked at some introductory CSS, adding in the inline styles directly in the HTML tags. What we want to begin to do now is start on basic CSS using the style tag within the head of your document. So let me show you how to begin with CSS here as you are getting started. Now obviously there are so many hundreds of different styles and properties that you're not going to get a tutorial on every single one of them. I think probably the approach that I will take here is I will show you how to integrate CSS, and then you can go on and practice on this yourself, because that's really what the tutorials are all about here on W3 Schools. So if you go to the w3schools.com website, you click on CSS, look for the CSS tutorial, and you can start at the beginning if you want, and I'm just going to skip around here a little bit. And what you'll see here is like if you go to the CSS home, you'll see an example, and this is some of the code that we can use to insert into our document just to try this out in the style tag. So let me go through some of these here, and then I'll show you the ones that you want to focus on here as you are beginning to work on CSS and incorporate it into your website. So you're going to see a lot of really basic tutorials at the beginning. You'll see the syntax here, which is kind of how it's written in the code with a selector and a declaration. You'll see a lot of different properties like colors and fonts and pixel values for sizes, things like that. You'll see a how-to, and I've talked about this in another tutorial. This is very important that you understand the different ways you can insert CSS into your website. And we talked about the inline style sheet, and this is kind of in, I think, a different order than the other page gave you. But if you scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see the internal style sheet. I'm sorry, let me go a little bit farther here. I think it's way down at the bottom. It's called inline, and eventually I'll find it. There it is. So inline is what we looked at in the previous tutorial, where you're just adding in a style into the code. Generally, once you practice on that a little bit, you probably won't use it as much because you have to apply a unique style for pretty much every single HTML tag that you have on there. Generally, you may not want to do that because you are going to apply styles to different pages at the same time and different sections, things like that. So generally you don't want to use the inline style very often. What you want to start with here would be the internal style sheet, and then we'll move to the external, and those are very similar. It's just that when you're starting to write CSS, it's a lot easier if you just add it into the head of your document in a style tag just like this. That's what we'll do in this tutorial. And then once you get comfortable with adding in some of these codes and trying them out, then what you want to do is move this code to an attached style sheet, and that's what this page talks about up at the top right here, the external style sheet. But again, that's a little bit complicated at the very beginning because you're having to fool with a separate file, a separate .css file, so you might as well just put your code in the head of your document to try that out. So let's try that out, and then I will go through some more of these and point out the ones that I would practice with. So let me just go back to the CSS home, and I'll use this code here just to try that out. So I have my HTML file from the tutorials open, my index.html file, and let's say I want to go about adding in some basic CSS here, and I will go ahead and type this in here, and then you can kind of see what it's going to look like. So I wanted this to be in the head of my document, and I want it to be after the title tag. Again, that title in the that goes up in the browser right there, so I'm going to put it here. Alright, and don't worry too much about indentation with this unless your text editor does it for you. So I'm going to type in style to get started with that, and I'll hit return, give myself a little space. So I've got the style tags right here. There's a closing style tag, obviously. I'm going to type body to start out, one space. Now I do already have that in here from a previous tutorial. I'm going to get rid of that. Apologize for that. Okay, and after I type body one space, I'm going to open this with the bracket, and you can see it automatically puts in that closing bracket, which is fine. I'm going to hit return once, type in background dash color, then I'm going to do colon one space, and I'll just use light blue, and then semicolon. And that's how you enter in a CSS rule for the body background color, light blue. Now again, I did use hexadecimal colors in a previous tutorial. I would recommend using hexadecimal colors for this class, but just for quick tutorial here, I'm going to use names. Now let me cover over here and check this, refresh. Okay, that changed it. Alright, let's come back and add in the heading tag again, and I'm going to take out all these inline styles because I don't want these anymore. So if you do have any inline styles, we'll take those out. And then the next one works just like that. H1, one space, again your bracket to begin. I'll hit return. I'm going to do color, colon one space, white. And then we'll also do text align here. That's another CSS rule, a property there. We're going to center that. Okay, click File, Save. Over here and refresh. Alright, and you can see that that centered the H1 and made it white. And then let's just add in one more here to change the font. And this is going to be the font for the paragraph. I don't even know if I really have a paragraph on there, but just to show you how this is written. Font dash family, and then your colon one space, and they're using Verdana here, semicolon, and then if your text editor does not automatically fill in the closing bracket there, you have to type that yourself. Now you can type in multiple attributes here for the font, and you can see as I'm typing, it gives me suggestions. And you do want to take advantage of those. Try those out if you're using brackets. And again, I mentioned in a previous tutorial that you might want to download this program and try it out, or if you're using another one, that's fine. Just it does have its advantages over Notepad. Okay, and I'll click File, Save, and I'll come over here, refresh. Alright, and then let's see, I don't really have a paragraph on here, so let's try to add a paragraph and make sure that the font works. So I'll put this here up at the top, and instead of the heading, I'll put this in as a paragraph. Okay, it looks just like that. File, save, get rid of this H3. And notice how the font changed based on what I typed here in the rule for the paragraph. So now it's the Verdana font and font size 20 pixels. So that's how you begin to add in your CSS as an internal style sheet style tag within the head of your document. So just a couple things here to remind you of. Make sure that you have the style tag within the head of the document. That's very important. When you're writing these out, you have to follow exactly how I typed and how it shows you on W3 Schools, with a space here, with a space between the colon and then the property. Got to have the semicolon to finish it off, and then make sure your brackets are correct. The spaces, like the vertical spaces, that doesn't matter. You know, if I had this in here, that's not going to matter. It's the spaces going horizontally, that's what can cause you some problems. Now the indentations also don't matter. You know, if I have this indented text edit or brackets, just does that so for organization, and makes it easier to see what you're doing when you have it indented like that. We go back here to W3 Schools, and I'll point out a few things that you might want to try out as you're learning this. So flipping through here, you'll see the colors. There's a lot of different ways that you can select colors for your page. So not only typing in names or hexadecimal values, but you can also put in like your RGB colors or hue, saturation, lightness, and it gives you a little slider on here somewhere where you can choose colors. So if you want to choose colors that way and type in the RGB values, browsers do recognize that. Again, I would probably recommend the hexadecimal colors. If you want to go into backgrounds, I'll probably post a separate tutorial on backgrounds really soon, because you can do a lot with full screen background images, but you really have to have some knowledge of a graphic design program like Photoshop to get a good background. And there are CSS background properties as well, background colors, but that one is one you can check out. The borders, this one also allows you to assign borders around your different elements, and you can see right here that shows you how to put that in. Margins, that gives you margins left and right. That's pretty obvious right here. Same thing with padding around that if you need to put in some spaces. And then there's also width and height attributes on here. And this talks about division tags. So if you do want to get into a division tag here, I'll show you what that looks like as you're trying this out. So if you go into the CSS box model, used to be that you would use the CSS box model for your layout of your page, but as I mentioned in a previous tutorial, there are better ways to do that. So, but you can add in these division tags to different sections of your page. So I'll show you how this might look. Let's see if I come over here, and let's say for this section right here it says welcome to my hobbies website. I just want to put that in a division tag, okay, just like that. Again, the brackets tries to be smart and close that, but actually I want to close that myself. So instead of a paragraph here, I'm putting this in a division tag. So I'll take off the paragraph, and if I do a file save and then I click here, refresh this, notice that my formatting goes off of it. You don't see it at all anymore because there's nothing on there. So a division tag by itself means absolutely nothing until you assign and put some CSS up here in the code. So let me make some space for this, and let's say to save time I'm just going to copy and paste this instead of typing it all by hand here. So I'm going to copy and paste this right here, and I'll click file save, come over here and refresh. And notice how that adds in a box around it. So you could add in multiple sections of content inside your layout, and that's going to start to give you a little better layout. You could put this around your menu if you wanted to separate that out a little bit and make that look a little more like a website. But if you do change this around, so you can see there's like the width. So if you did say 600, and let's say the border smaller, so we've got 605. Drop the padding down a little bit because that's a pretty big number for the padding. So file save, changing around those numbers and refresh, see what you can get right there. So that would work a little better for a nav bar if I wanted to change that. You can put backgrounds on there. You can even do background images within a division tag. So hopefully you can kind of see where I'm going with this. A lot of different things for you to try out now, and that's how I would recommend that you try as you go kind of one by one through here. Let me mention a few other things. There's text formatting and colors on here. The fonts are kind of interesting to try out. Now when you do look at HTML, typically there's like a font family, and there usually are three things listed here. There's a specific font, then there's sort of a general category here, and then the serif or sans serif. And these are kind of fallback. It's like a fallback system if the browser doesn't support the first font. Now, I've never really seen a browser doesn't support Times New Roman or Arial, but typically when you look at writing fonts within the family in HTML and CSS, you'll see three things listed there. I'm not really that concerned about it for your projects, but you might see that in tutorials. And so that's the text, and that's probably about as far as you would need to go here for the beginning tutorial. Links is a tutorial that really should require a separate one from me. I need to post one on links and background images and a couple other things. So that's really about as far as you need to get at the beginning, and then we'll kind of keep working through here. But there's a lot to work on, and you want to just try those out by adding them into the style tag in the head of your document. That would be the internal style sheet.